From listener-supported KUOW in Seattle, welcome to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. Today begins our holiday break here on Soundside. Myself, our producers, my editor, we are going to take a little bit of time off to enjoy the holidays with our friends and family. We're going to be eating some food. Some of us will be working on future stories for you that you'll hear in the new year. But we still have plenty of shows here. We are revisiting some of our favorite stories of the year this week and next. Today, we're going to focus on local businesses here in the Pacific Northwest. Later this hour, we'll talk about why Kirkland-based Costco is having such a big moment, its rise to become a retail behemoth, and whether the success can last. That's in about 12 minutes. But first, let's return to a story that first aired in March of this year. And I'm watching a basketball game with my fingers. So there's a rumble underneath my fingertips, and I can feel where the player is dribbling now towards the key. Just got denied a shot. The device I've got in my hands is around the size of a tablet. The surface feels like rubber, and parts of it lift up under my fingers as it follows the action racing up and down the court. Audio cues into my headphones help me keep track of things like the score. And now another shot coming in. So a 2-point shot. It just spoke to me, and I could feel where the hoop is kind of rumbling when the shot went in. This is really cool. I'm visiting the Bellevue offices of a startup called OneCourt. The company says its devices enable the first tactile sports broadcasts. The goal is to give a deeper game experience for sports fans who are blind or have low vision and do it in real time. A social media influencer recently went viral when he took the tablet for a spin at a Trailblazers game. You may have seen the video on TikTok or Instagram.
You don't understand. I've been at basketball games having no idea what's going on, like cheering for the wrong team.
Portland now offers OneCourt devices at every home game. It was the first team to do so.
2 words, life-changing.
Kunal Mehta does UX design for OneCourt. He's a big sports fan. Over the years, as a blind person, he's typically relied on radio broadcasts or TV audio to follow play-by-play. For instance, he's recently started watching tennis, and he says following that means he has to keep a lot in his head during matches.
Kind of know who starts serving and I count who is hitting the ball. First shot is the person who serves, second one is a return, and that way I kind of figure out, okay, whose point it is. And sometimes different players have different kind of grunts when they play tennis, so you also figure out which player is hitting the ball.
That's a lot of work. Things changed in 2023 when Kunal first tried out a OneCourt device to follow a basketball game.
I think it was magical because it's a totally new dimension. It's moving under my hands, and then when points are scored, let's say when it's a 3-point shot, it's a stronger vibration, and then you also experience the vibration from different places. It's not just the ball moving from left to right or right to left, but you're able to kind of understand where the player has shot that and where it's going.
Kunal says it's made the social side of sports more real for him.
It's also, fun to be in stadiums and just cheer with the crowd versus be more reactive when you don't know actually what's going on, and when you try to figure out based on crowd's reaction. For a change, it's really nice to kind of be in the thick of things, I would say.
He says he's happy that his work can help unlock that experience for more people. Spokane native Jared Mace is the founder and CEO of OneCourt. I sat down with him to hear more about the inspiration behind the invention and where it's going from here.
It was back in September of 2021. I was a student still at the UW. I was a junior there, and I saw this video of a blind person at a soccer match. So he was sitting in the stands with a woman who watched the game below and at the same time moved his hands across a game board to represent the action. And this just really stuck with me. It was such a clearly meaningful experience and one that was personal. It was real time. It was so special. And I just started thinking about how could we bring that to everybody else. Also, as someone who struggled with vision growing up, I feel like I had that personal connection and kind of motivation for this.
What was the first OneCourt prototype like?
Yeah, we have it here at the lab. It's a piece of plywood.
Yes.
With a little microcontroller glued on there and just in a set of little coin motors that you might find at a hobby shop or Amazon, and we basically had hard-coded overnight this little just demo where we were trying to see, okay, can we create this kind of experience of moving vibration back and forth down this line? And I think it was those prototypes where we were asking like very small questions, and then the answers gave us the confidence to ask bigger and bigger questions. So each prototype has kind of taken a bigger role in questioning our assumptions. So, now we have basically built this haptic display that is capable of delivering the world's first tactile broadcast. Fans are able to feel live sports through their fingertips, and I think that's, for us, just a very exciting accomplishment.
What's the biggest technical challenge of bringing that to reality? Because it seems like many people were having the same idea.
People often ask, why didn't it happen 5 years ago? And I think the answer really is the data infrastructure that the teams and leagues have invested in have created a ton of new opportunities for fan experiences. Basically, if people aren't familiar, the leagues are tracking everything that's happening on the field. They know where the ball is, they know where the players are, and all of those other details in between, and they know it in real time. So they're using this data in really cool ways, and I think we saw that data as an opportunity to power this tactile broadcast. And it's a huge challenge, right? I mean, it's very complicated data. There's a ton of information, more than we could ever use. So building that experience and then delivering it to fans, it's definitely a challenge. But I think ultimately solving that challenge became one of the most special experiences for fans because, the common experience today of being 30 seconds or a minute behind the action, we just totally eliminated. So people are telling us all the time that I feel like I'm a part of the action for the first time. And I'm not waiting for someone else to describe what happened. I'm in it, and I'm able to react, and I'm able to heckle with my husband over what just happened. And I think that's exactly the experience that it's more than we could have imagined. And now it is scalable, and we are very excited to make this available in venues, but also eventually at home, right? Fans have been asking for it from the beginning. When can I use this at home? So we're excited to make that available, and we're targeting 2026 for that launch. So,
what was it like to watch one court in action with somebody who was blind or seeing impaired for the first time? What did you feel?
There's a lot of emotion there. For us to sit in the stands, enjoy the game together, everybody watching, I think it was the first time especially, it was a huge pinch me moment. Even in the beginning, it was just difficult to even imagine that experience coming true. So to see it happen, to experience it live, yeah, I mean, it's something we hold on to for sure. Hard to describe. I think it's absolutely the motivation and the real meaning behind our work, right? That's it. That is the experience. So
did you approach the Trailblazers, or how did that relationship start?
We've been talking to lots of different leagues and teams, and we had connected early with the Trailblazers, and I think found a really strong resonance of values and also sense for innovation. They took an early bet in saying, let's try this, and we did a 3-game pilot with them last season, and that went very successfully. We've worked out some kinks, and we're able to make it into full implementation this year. But yeah, that relationship has been, so powerful for us to have a partner that's willing to innovate alongside us. And because I think in the beginning, we're dealing in hypotheticals. Will this work? Will this generate the experience that we're designing? Will it connect to the Wi-Fi or the cellular networks? Will it connect to the data? And will it ultimately deliver that fan experience? A lot of hypotheticals early on. But I think now that we have that proof point, it's been incredible to see just the uptick in excitement around different leagues and sports.
So are you getting more calls or
Absolutely.
more
So,
interest? Yeah.
One Court is already in the span of a single NBA season. We're already in 3 NBA clubs, fully integrated with Portland Trailblazers, as we've talked about, the Sacramento Kings, and the Phoenix Suns. So those are 3 amazing teams, all of which have partnered with Ticketmaster and One Court to make this happen. Of course, we're so grateful. Ticketmaster, I think, is an amazing partner because, of course, they're considering accessibility across the user flow, right? They're thinking about it at the time of ticketing. One Court's considering the viewing experience, and it's really exciting for us to bring those together and try to innovate. We're ultimately just so excited because it's just expanding more and more. We have a couple more announcements very soon, and then, we'll be expanding to many more sports. But we already support soccer, basketball, baseball, football, and there is always another sport. So we totally feel that, and we're excited to do them all eventually.
That's Jared Mace. He's the CEO and founder of One Court, a local startup making the first ever tactile sports broadcasts for fans who are blind or low vision. And this story first aired on Soundside in March of this year. You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. When we come back, what comes to mind when I mention Kirkland? A city on Lake Washington, or maybe $5 rotisserie chickens, hoodies, all kinds of giant quantities of toilet paper. For most of the world, the word Kirkland makes them think of Costco. We'll dig into how Costco became such a retail behemoth, how it wants to remain a fan favorite, and whether it can all last. That's coming up right here on KUOW after a quick break. Welcome back to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. During our holiday break, we are revisiting some of our favorite stories of the year. And today we're spending the hour on stories about local businesses in Washington state. Now let's turn to one particular big box behemoth based in Issaquah. In 1983, Costco opened its first store in Seattle, and today it's the 3rd largest retailer in the world, with more than 900 stores globally. But while Costco is known for its devoted customer base and generosity towards its employees, how long can that kind of growth and goodwill be sustainable? I spoke with Molly Fisher back in October to find out. Molly is a reporter with The New Yorker. She wrote a story called Can the Golden Age of Costco Last? And Molly told me that for her, this story is very personal.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's one of those things that, I think I remember being kind of shocked in adolescence or adulthood to realize that other people's families shopped at Costco too. It felt so much like a Fisher family institution. My dad was a very devoted Costco shopper. He and his best friend, I just remember listening to them kind of compare notes on their various Costco journeys and like how in they were with the Costco employees at their warehouse and, who was buying canned tuna there or like, whatever. Like it was sort of a source of endless conversation and a source of, for me as a child, many treats and delights. And, my brothers and I would go along with my dad and like serve as the gophers, like scampering around the aisles of the warehouse, helping him collect stuff and, come home with a box of Otter Pops and a 3-pack of cereal or whatever.
One thing I realized when I moved away from the Pacific Northwest was that a lot of people don't think of Kirkland as a place. Kirkland is the brand. Like, do you remember when you realized there's a city called Kirkland and it's not just like the brand of your toilet paper?
That's a great question. I don't remember. I don't have a moment of remembering that, but I can recall having to sort of iron out for myself the journey that Costco took from its headquarters in Kirkland to Issaquah and, retaining the Kirkland name because Kirkland signature is a catchier name than Issaquah signature. Certainly Kirkland signature. I mean, I remember, my dad had Kirkland signature pants, which, was kind of a source of family hilarity, but, solid pants. I think probably the biggest hit Christmas presents I ever got for my 2 younger brothers were Kirkland signature sweatshirts. So I think there is power in that brand almost unexpectedly. People feel a real sense of loyalty and devotion to Kirkland, even as it's a kind of anti-brand almost.
Yeah. So you go through the history of Costco in your piece for The New Yorker, opened in 1983, and it probably would never have started if not for this guy named Saul Price. Can you kind of give us the background? Who's Saul Price and how did he figure into the history of Costco?
Sure. Well, so I will do my best to keep this clear because I realize it's a slightly tangled prehistory, but it really is all kind of interwoven and interlocking. Costco, as you said, didn't start until 1983, but a lot of the essential ideas behind Costco and sort of the main players, including Jim Sinegal, the company's co-founder and longtime CEO, they kind of hit the scene in the 50s with a company called FedMart that starts in San Diego, that is the brainchild of this guy, Saul Price, who was originally a lawyer. He was the child of these two sort of labor socialist Jewish immigrants. He was born in the Bronx, lived in the Bronx. They were working in the garment industry in New York City and eventually relocated to San Diego. Saul went to law school, was a, sort of bit of a boy wonder, a brilliant kid. And eventually, through a couple of his clients at his law firm, heard about this store in Los Angeles called Fedco that was making a killing, basically selling goods to people who paid a membership fee to shop there, which was important because at the time there were laws in place that allowed manufacturers to set minimum prices for the goods they sold. But you could get around that. If you weren't a store open to the public, you were a club selling things to members. And basically, Saul found out that some 500 or so people in the San Diego area were driving to Los Angeles to shop at this place. And they decide, seems like we could use a Fedco of our own here. Fedco isn't interested in expanding, so Saul decides to do it on his own with his partners in San Diego. They call it FedMart, and it's not, I should say, a grocery store. You hear Costco and you kind of think of like groceries and food and all of that. It's selling things like alcohol and jewelry and furniture, but at discounted prices that people are really excited about. And that's where Saul kind of locks into the business model that will eventually translate to Costco in some ways, which includes what he calls the intelligent loss of sales. And what that means is that you, as a retailer, don't try to meet every conceivable customer desire. You don't try to sell 18 different kinds of toothpaste because people might want 18 different kinds of toothpaste. You decide you're going to sell one kind of toothpaste, and you realize that most people who come into your store will be perfectly happy to buy that one brand of toothpaste. And if there are a few people who don't want to, you can intelligently lose those sales. So it's a fascinating strategy because it enables them to be much more efficient and much more quick to turn over their merchandise. They're able to sell much greater quantities of a limited number of things. And that's something that Costco picks up on eventually.
So we have this intelligent loss of sales kind of ethos. The other, breakthrough here with FedMart is you are charging people for the right to shop, which is also like eventually, what really drives Costco profits when Costco expands and becomes what it is today. The idea that people will pay a fee in order to come in and shop at your store is new. Jim Sinegal is like a teenager who works for Saul Price, right? So how does Jim Sinegal come on the scene and then eventually open Costco in Seattle?
Sure. Well, if it's okay, I want to make one quick distinction, which is just that it's true that FedMart does charge a fee to shop, but it's a little different from what Costco eventually does. It's closer to what Price Club, another company that Saul Price goes on to start, does, in that the fee that FedMart is charging is really small. It's like $2 for a lifetime membership. So that really doesn't become a source of revenue for the company or a big source of profits for them. Price Club, though, Saul's next company, they start charging a beefier membership fee, and that enables them to kind of factor it into their margins and make it a real profit center for the company, which is an important part of Costco's business model. Going back to Jim Sinegal, he's a student at San Diego City College, I believe. He's at a local community college when he takes a, random day job unloading mattresses and sofas and stuff at a FedMart for Saul Price. And he ends up staying with the company for the next 20 years. He really learns a lot from Saul, moves up through the ranks, and kind of becomes the exemplar of what had been, in some ways, the other crucial pillar of Saul's management philosophy, which is that he really believes in a responsibility that an employer has to take care of their employees and to be this sort of responsible steward of their well-being. He believes that providing jobs is a really crucial part of what you're doing as a business owner.
And
he
developing people, like
and promoting
focusing
from
on
within.
people's potential and promoting, people and training them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Enabling people to grow. There's this like kind of intense quote that that I use in the piece. He writes in a memo to his employees at FedMart at one point, "You must feel confident that you are working for a fine and honest company. You will be permitted, encouraged, and sometimes even coerced into growing with the company to the limit of your ability," which, he's not messing around. He's a pretty intimidating figure, I think, in a lot of ways. But Senegal seems to thrive under that mentorship, and he really becomes a crucial part of the business. He eventually, towards the end of his time there, he's running this centralized warehouse distribution system that is part of what enables FedMart to function as well as it does. And that ends up becoming the crux of what Price Club, Saul's next company, does so effectively.
So Senegal is sort of, along with Saul Price's actual biological son, he's kind of the heir apparent to Saul. But then there is this break where a group of investors want to open a Price Club basically in Seattle. Saul Price is not interested. And Senegal jumps, right?
Yeah.
He decides to come up to Seattle, open basically a copy of Price Club, but under a new company, Costco.
Yeah, that's right. And, he was very direct when we spoke about this in terms of saying, like, our business plan was, let's duplicate what Price Club is doing, which, is true as far as it goes. He opens a warehouse wholesale club, which is what Price Club, Saul's business at the time, is doing. But it also is selling himself a little short, just in that Costco does kind of take it to the next level beyond what Saul Price and his family business had managed to do. He is able to expand much more aggressively than Price Club did, just in terms of opening additional warehouses. I think the first Costco warehouse in Seattle opens in September of 1983. And by the end of 1983, so like in the next 2 or 3 months, basically, they open 2 more. There's one in Spokane and one in Portland, I think, that are also 1983 openings. So they really are going fast. They also incorporate things that Price Club didn't really have or didn't expand into quite as successfully or aggressively, like groceries. They do lots of groceries and fresh food. They open gas stations. I mean, gas stations eventually become a big part of Costco's business. They open pharmacies, which is another thing that Costco has that, has been important to its power and its reach. So he takes what Saul had done and he really builds on it.
And what is the secret sauce at Costco that Jim Senegal is cooking with? I mean, he's this legendary guy, business school case studies galore.
Yeah.
Like, people you write about how, there are certain business economist style folks who are like, this is the gold standard for how to run a responsible company, like how to do capitalism ethically.
Yeah.
How does he become that figure, Jim Senegal? And, what is he doing that makes Costco such an icon?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, it really is kind of staggering when you start talking to people, because it almost like the figure who emerges when you speak to people who worked alongside him, who worked for him. It's like almost superhuman in some ways, which is almost a little bit of a challenge as a journalist, because you don't want to seem like you're blowing a corporate leader up to deified proportions or something. But it's very clear that people hold him in this incredibly high regard. Even it sort of is true both in terms of the way he seems to understand his business in a really granular, detail-oriented way. You hear stories about him visiting warehouses across the country and knowing exactly how much every can of bees ought to cost, or everything on the shelves. He's minutely attuned to the details of the business that he's running. But I think there's also clearly a real interpersonal talent and an ability to connect with people and to make them feel mentored and supported and appreciated. I mean, clearly, Saul Price was a really powerful mentor to Senegal. But, my sense and my understanding is that he could be a bit of a prickly guy. He was a pretty tough boss to have in a lot of ways. And I think Senegal is able to kind of be the nice dad that it seems like people really respond to and crave. That can be really powerful. I mean, if you've ever had a boss that, you feel like values what you do and also wants to see you learn and grow and expand and appreciates the work that you put in, that is kind of rocket fuel for, I think, people's performance. And he brings that out in people. When you hear people who worked for him or worked alongside him talk about him, they clearly just thrived with his leadership.
You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman, and I'm talking with New Yorker staff writer Molly Fisher, who wrote about Costco's past, its wildly successful growth, and its uncertain future under a third CEO, two removed from the legendary Jim Sinegal, co-founder of Costco. And Molly, speaking of Sinegal, you wrote about how his warehouse visits became like these inspirational events, morale lifters, whereas for most employees at any company, if you have like the CEO walking through your office, it's not inspiration. It's like scary and stressful, right? And so the fact that he was able to have this like he was like a mascot and a leader at once.
Yeah, it's kind of a remarkable needle to thread. And I don't want to discount the degree to which I think it was scary for people. Like, I think that, I think that they're, people were certainly aware that they were being held to a high standard, and that he had very high standards. But I think that when people also feel appreciated and feel like their adherence to those high standards is valued and noticed, they kind of rise to meet the challenge a lot of times. So I think that it was sort of that balance that enabled him to bring that out in people, probably.
Senegal's relationship to Wall Street strikes me as really key to carving out the unique culture and business model of Costco, because you write that like the focus was not on shareholder value. Mm-hmm. It was about keeping margins lower than 14%. And if the margins crept up, he would get a report about it. Like you talked about being in the minutia about these things. I mean, you got a chance to sit down with him in Kirkland and actually, made that pilgrimage to his family office, sitting with the guy. How did he resist pressure to focus on that shareholder value, which especially in the 90s was kind of the big shift in business that was happening everywhere?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that it was a striking thing that he managed to pull off, and that, over time, zooming out a little bit to the present day, what I heard from folks in the finance world and on Wall Street that I talked to was that Costco has now kind of earned this credibility where they've shown that their model works. They've shown that they can pay employees well, they can keep their margins low, and that their business will be able to grow and thrive and succeed over time. But, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, that was definitely something that he took heat from Wall Street over. And, when you go back working on a story like I was and read press from 20, 25 years ago, you do see tons of stories about Wall Street analysts complaining that Costco is too generous to its employees, that they need to be generating better returns. But he, over time, always says that, his hope is to build a company for the long term, for the long haul, and that his goal is that Costco can last and sustain itself rather than focusing on these short-term returns, and that they are going to develop credibility with their customers for always having low prices. They're going to keep customers renewing their memberships because they trust that Costco will have the lowest possible prices. And they're going to develop a workforce that is stable and that is long-serving and expert and secure in their roles, rather than being kind of burnt out and harried and miserable the way you often see retail frontline workers treated and the kinds of jobs that they're being asked to fulfill. So he makes a bet that this will work, and he's able to pull it off. Although, I was struck when I was going back and reading through press, because around the time he retires, he did an interview with a reporter at the Seattle Times who kind of asked him whether he thought that his ability to maintain that stance and to be able to stand up to Wall Street and say that he was going to conduct his business the way he was going to conduct it, whether that was kind of his privilege as a founder, and if he kind of got more leeway to do things his way because he had this credibility as the guy who started the whole thing. And what he says at the time, this is in 2011, end of 2011, he says, well, I think the guy who comes immediately after me, he's been around forever. He's going to be fine. It's the third or fourth generation of leadership that I worry about. Then maybe it starts to get harder. And now you have the third CEO of the company's history in place. That's Ron Vakras. He became CEO in 2024. And you do, in the last few years, start to see some murmurings in different corners of the company that perhaps things are changing. I mean,
let me ask about that because, okay, you have the focus on paying employees well, which, for a long time was side-eyed by Wall Street, but then has been shown to be an efficient way to get the most productivity out of people, the most retention, and therefore makes a business sense. You have the $1.50 hot dogs. That's another big Senegal thing that, like,
iconic,
and it inspires customer loyalty. But as you say, with the passing of the torch a couple times now, there are signs that maybe that soul of Costco is starting to feel the strain of pressure from Wall Street and from investors. So what are you seeing now, and what did you find in your reporting about how that's going?
Well, in the last few years, you've seen a new stirring of union activity at Costco, for one thing. Costco's workforce has always had a small but not insignificant percentage of warehouses that are organized. They're unionized with the Teamsters. And that's partly because Costco and Price Club, that predecessor, they merged in the early 90s. It was basically Costco acquiring Price Club, but, they kind of treat it as a merger of equals because the two companies have this shared history and shared respect. And Price Club's workforce is unionized. And Costco keeps those warehouses unionized when they take them over. But by and large, the rest of them, and as Costco expands, its warehouses, its workforce is non-union. So it's notable when, starting in 2023 or so, you start to see some warehouses and pockets of the workforce interested in unionizing. And I think in some ways that's probably a function of changes in the labor market after the pandemic and people's relationship to their jobs changing around that time. I mean, I work in media, of course, and, I know just based on my own experience, you've seen a lot of magazines, media outlets, websites interested in unionizing in a way that perhaps they weren't 10 or 15 years ago. So there's broader cultural stuff at play. But I think at Costco in particular, you have new leaders and new people coming in and a workforce that's undergone this huge, huge, huge expansion. I mean, the company's footprint is now massive. There are over 900 Costco warehouses around the world, and I forget exactly how many employees. I don't have it in front of me. I can't pull it up right now. But, there's a massive workforce. And so trying to maintain that sense of personal investment in the company that has really helped it to thrive for so long is challenging when you have that many people and that you've grown that quickly. I think also you have employees looking with alarm in some cases at what feels like a change in the ethos at the top. There's always, as we discussed, been this emphasis on promotion from within. The two CEOs that succeeded Senegal were both people who started off similarly in hourly roles at Price Club and at FedMart and, had come up through the ranks along those channels. So when, as you did last year, you have someone like the new CFO who was previously a CFO finance guy at Cougar, the supermarket chain, come in, a lot of warehouse employees are kind of like, whoa, 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 who is this guy? And like, do we have to be worried about his track record, with employees at Cougar? This is not necessarily something that inspires a lot of confidence in a retail workforce that has been used to having this sense of loyalty and investment from their employers.
Yeah, and Kroger not known for having, rocky relationship with employee and how they're
some
treated.
Pretty disconcerting reports on the company's labor practices during the pandemic, especially. So in the very recent past. So it's understandable that there would be a degree of alarm there, I think.
So I guess the big question is, and this is from one Costco fan to another, like, we'll just be open about our bias. Like,
sure,
I also grew up as a kid who would just run through and get the samples. And, it was like a big outing for my family every weekend when we go to Costco. Like, there's a lot of, especially here in the Seattle area, love for Costco. But company is a company, right? This is
Yeah.
capitalism. And the big question that your article poses is, can the golden age of Costco last? What will you be watching for? Is it employee turnover? Is it continued unionization efforts? Is it margins going up, or other leadership changes? Like, what will answer, I guess, that question for you of whether the golden age of Costco can last?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, one thing I should say is that, I don't think that the fact that the workforce is unionizing is in itself a bad thing. Like, that isn't necessarily an indication that the company is unhealthy or that there's a problem. It just indicates that things are changing. And of course, change is inevitable. But I think that, what you really had for a long time in Costco's history was this sense of, I use this word guardedly, but of paternalism, kind of, and I don't mean that in a evil patriarchy or anything kind of way. I just mean like it was really about singular leadership figure who was kind of a father figure in some ways and who really was guiding the company on the basis of his own ethos and his moral code and his sense of how things would be run. And it's very different to go from something that is guided by one person and their morality, however admirable it may be, and their blind spots, to something that is perhaps in some ways more democratically governed, or is more there's more sort of ground up organizing or effort to ensure particular labor conditions. I mean, I think that, when you hear things like one of the Teamsters leaders writing a letter to members that says, this is not Jim Sinegal's Costco anymore, that's remarkable and I think important. But it also bears noting that even when it was, quote unquote, Jim Sinegal's Costco, there were problems. Like, there were things like a gender discrimination suit that a group of women brought about 20 years ago, where they said that, they felt like they had trouble climbing the ranks in the way that Jim Sinegal and many of these leaders did. They felt like positions of leadership at warehouses weren't publicized or posted in a way that enabled them to ascend through the ranks. And, it's a reminder that when you look at what had seemed like this kind of network of really close relationships and nurturing mentorship and all that, from a different angle, that can be, a glass ceiling, or that can be a way that certain people don't get those opportunities because it's all based on these kinds of idiosyncratic personal bonds. So all of that is just to say, change isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I think Costco inevitably will have to change to continue to succeed. But I hope that it's able to maintain the sense of ethics that have made so many people feel committed to it over the years.
I just thought your piece was such a good read, good, history lesson about the store, but also exploration about like what it means to run a quote unquote ethical company and how to maintain that with all the pressures that are out there to extract as much profit as possible. And then also what it means to be an employee at a place like that. And as you say, this idea of like, well, does it always have to come from the top? Can it be ground up? And then also just there were so many fun anecdotes, like the fact that 71% of the population of Iceland is
Who knew?
a member of Costco. What? This is crazy.
There's no shortage of insane facts about Costco. The first time my husband read this piece, he said, I want more mind-blowing facts. Get more mind-blowing facts in there. And I do my best to deliver, but really, it's hard to stop once you start.
Molly Fisher is a staff writer for The New Yorker, and her piece is titled, Can the Golden Age of Costco Last? Thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you.
And this conversation first aired in October. You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Our holiday shows roll along. Next up, the beauty and oddity that is Cougar Gold canned cheese. I've always wanted to know the backstory of this. That's coming up in just a minute. Stick with us. You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. We're spending the hour looking back at some of our favorite stories about local businesses based around Washington. For students in Pullman, the Washington State Creamery may be best known for serving up scoops of apple crisp on campus. But to the rest of us, it is the home of Cougar Gold. Former KUOW arts and culture reporter Mike Davis and I dug into the history of Cougar Gold cheese and why it's so popular. This was back in September of 2023 to commemorate the creamery's 75th anniversary.
I've never heard of this cheese, but I'm told it's a nearly 2-pound can of cheddar cheese that is sought after across the state. It's the only cheese we've seen make the local news when it's in short supply.
Cougar Gold
There
cheese.
is something about that cheese that really makes people go wild, and as a result, it sells out pretty fast.
It even makes the news when it appears on other TV shows.
Well, that delicious Cougar Gold cheese, which of course is made at Washington State University down in Pullman, is going to be featured on an episode of The Rachel Ray Show next week.
We heard from a producer on this show that Seattle chef and restaurateur Tom Douglas has a fridge full of the cheese. We called him and he denied this claim. But while on the phone, he did look through his collection of Cougar Gold.
I have, looks like 6 or 7 cans in my fridge right now, and the dates go back to 2013. Here's a 14, here's a 16, a 12, and an 09. I have an 09 also.
Tom ages the cheese and tries different years.
It's fun to pull out 3 cans at a time of maybe 3-year difference in vintage. Because you think it's in a can and it's probably not going to change, right? But it actually does change a little bit in the can. And so it's fun to kind of taste each vintage against each other.
The cheese lasts indefinitely in the can, but once open, you have a limited amount of time to eat it. That's why, according to Tom, it's really good for parties. Now, for many people, canned cheese gets a bad rap. But the taste of Cougar Gold, at least according to Tom, is something special.
It's just a tasty, good mouthfeel. I wouldn't say it has a great melting quality, but it melts fine, which you wouldn't expect necessarily from a hard cheese like that.
Bethany Jean Clement is a food critic at the Seattle Times and also a fan of Cougar Gold.
It comes out this buttery gold color with the sharpness of the cheddar complemented by this like luxurious richness.
Bethany grew up in Seattle and says that Cougar Gold was always held in high esteem.
I think it's unusual, to say the least, to have essentially a state cheese, sort of like a state bird, but the pride that people in Washington take in Cougar Gold is just extraordinary. It's got this real cult following.
Bethany says that almost any time she writes something about cheese for the Seattle Times, when she checks the comments on social media for the article, someone will always bring up Cougar Gold as the superior alternative. She recently wrote about breakfast sandwiches, and someone wrote in.
Someone was like, Cougar Gold, the cheese you want on your breakfast sandwich. I'm like, okay.
To learn more about the 75-year-old creamery that makes Cougar Gold, we called John Haugen. He's the manager of the Washington State University Creamery. Libby Dankman spoke with him about a question I definitely have. Why does Cougar Gold come in cans?
Back in the 40s, there was a grant that WSU got that was from the U.S. Can Company and the Army to try to figure out how to package cheese better to get it to the troops better. And they didn't really have plastic as an option at that time, so they were having a lot of spoilage. So they tried to put it in a can, but the milk supply at the time wasn't super clean, and they had a lot of issues with trying to put the cheese in a can. So Dr. Golding, which is where the name Cougar Gold comes from, came up with a extra culture that he put into the cheese. We call it an adjunct culture that makes Cougar Gold taste different from regular cheddar. That adjunct culture basically outcompeted anything that was causing problems in the cheese that they tried to put in a can, and it worked. So they started putting it in a can, and then they came out with plastic. And nobody's going to put cheese in a can if they can put it in plastic, because that's a lot cheaper.
Wow.
So, but it was our little niche, and we kept doing it, and we still do. Even though price of steel has gone way up, it's still a good deal.
Is cheese culture sort of like a sourdough culture where you keep it alive for a long time?
Yeah, very similar. The adjunct culture that we use, we actually transfer it almost every day into a new broth that it grows in. And then we inoculate it in some milk and put it into the cheese. And that's how that part works. There's another culture that we buy from a commercial culture company, and they propagate those cultures. But yeah, pretty similar.
So is the culture that you're using in the Cougar Gold today, is it, a descendant then of that original culture that was added for the quality in the can?
It sure is. We're really careful with how we handle it. Our students put it into a box that they sanitize the inside of the box, and there's gloves that they put their hands in so nobody's touching it. It's all clean in there when they do the transfer. It's not out in the open or anything.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, I mean, there's a lot of science involved in keeping that consistent and making sure that the quality remains the same.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite thing to make with Cougar Gold, John?
Oh, there's always Cougar Gold mac and cheese, but I don't know. I really just like having it on a cheese platter with some meat and some crackers and a glass of wine.
Nice. Okay, I'm hungry now, so we got to get going. First of all, before we go, how is the Creamery celebrating its 75th anniversary? What are the plans?
So yeah, that's coming up this weekend. Time flies. Our anniversary is on September 24th, and so the game day on the 23rd is when we're really focusing in on it. We made some red velvet ice cream. That's the only time we've ever made red velvet ice cream, kind of as a special treat for that. And we made a special batch of cracked pepper and chive and put a special magnet on the lid saying it's our 75th anniversary version of our cracked pepper and chive cheese. And we're going to have balloons and streamers and all kinds of things like that in the store to whip up some excitement on Saturday.
Well, I just wish you guys the best on your 75th anniversary. I'm going to have some Cougar Gold this weekend, maybe watching the football on Sunday. And, you know, here's to 75 more. Thanks for continuing to make delicious cheese and making the state proud. I appreciate you, John.
All right. Thank you very much.
And that story first aired in September 2023. 2 years later, the Washington State Creamery is still going strong. You can still buy your canned Cougar Gold around the state. I like to take it as a gift when I travel to go and stay at somebody's house that's never heard of canned cheese before. They get a kick out of it. You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. And let's wrap up our hour by looking at one local organization that faced a big change this year. In February, the Grand Illusion Cinema screened its final film. For over 50 years, the Little Theater at the corner of 50th and University Way in the U District showed movies to passionate filmgoers. And in that span, the theater changed owners, it was renamed, and at one point it became the longest-running completely volunteer-managed cinema in the country. But like so many movie theaters around the world, the Grand Illusion's time came to an end. The owners announced back in 2023 that the site was for sale, and they would not be extending the Illusion's lease beyond January 2025. That caused volunteers and patrons to sell out the final week of screenings, with some intrepid fans waiting in the rain for hours before the final screener of 1985's Reanimator on 35mm. Soundside producer Jason Burrows was on scene to find out how folks were feeling about the closing of this particular chapter in a storied theater's history.
The most unique thing about it is how you enter the place, because it's not like a movie theater where there's a big marquee and a big entrance and a huge lobby and like 5 things of popcorn. It's kind of like tucked away up off of the street. You have to climb up a short little bit of stairs. And then the lobby you walk into, it's very small, and you'd find a little counter and the box office person's there. Yeah, I mean, it's just like a real cozy place for movie watching. My name's Brian Alter, and I'm the executive director of the Grand Illusion Cinema, and I've been here for about 22 years.
With hand-painted signs out front, the makeshift 70-seat auditorium felt cozy. The walls were lined with red velvet curtains and the ceiling covered in ornate tin panels. Originally, the building housed a dentist's office before being converted into a movie house in 1970. It was remodeled by the Northwest Film Forum, becoming the Grand Illusion Cinema we know today, with its ornate fabric chairs and a signature love seat in the back corner, back in 1997. Brian said it's a building full of fond memories for him and his fellow volunteers.
I mean, my favorite memory is that I met my wife here. You know, I just had been coming to the movie on the nights that she was a volunteer, and we connected over volunteering here, amongst other things, and then years later we're married.
I'm Richard Gilbert. I've been living in Seattle since 1993. I've been a patron here since around that time, but I've been volunteering since 2018. My favorite memory from working here are the 2 times that I had the honor, privilege, and joy of projecting It's a Wonderful Life on Christmas Day.
Another of Richard's favorite memories, when the Grand Illusion screened the all-time classic, 1922's Nosferatu.
I'd been waiting for its 100th anniversary since 1978. So finding myself working at a cinema that was sensitive to silent film, we showed it on, I think it was September of 2022 on International Silent Film Day. So I got to project Nosferatu for its 100th anniversary.
The Grand Illusion Cinema was the longest-running volunteer-only theater in the country, and with every person we spoke to, that history of camaraderie and community was apparent. Both volunteers and moviegoers wanted a final chance to be back in the space with the team who dedicated their time for free to bringing the cinema to life. Lead projectionist Spencer Sundell and lead programmer Trevor Brandt expressed why they wanted to be at the Grand Illusion on closing night.
Oh, you're going to make me choke up. I feel places like this, small, truly independent, collectively empowered arts venues are vital to the good health and the good imagination of every community everywhere. And I feel privileged to be any kind of part of that, and honored to be perhaps a more major part of that. And I would not be anywhere else but here tonight, no matter what.
I think we all just love this space so much that I'll start getting choked up too. Just I don't know, I think Grand Illusion feels like one of the most community-based art spaces in Seattle, and just that feeling of all of us working together as a collective because we love movies and we love the Grand Illusion so much, no matter where it winds up being. It's just a very special thing.
With the closing of this chapter of the Grand Illusion story, the theater's volunteers are turning the page to the next, finding a new location where they can continue the tradition of screening eclectic films for an audience of movie lovers, just maybe with some structural improvements.
My hope is that we have adequate climate control and 2 toilets. Those would be just the 2 golden things to have, and a larger screen and more seats and more comfortable seats. I think we're going to be in good shape.
Volunteer projectionist and manager Richard Gilbert said the team is currently searching for a new location for the theater. But while there's hope on the horizon for that new location, saying goodbye is still bittersweet.
I'm excited to find a new home, a grander Grand Illusion, as Brian says, but it's sad to leave this funky little place.
For now, the Grand Illusion Cinema will continue to live on in pop-up events scheduled at the Northwest Film Forum and Central Cinema over the next few weeks. For more information on those events, as well as how to keep track of the cinema's search for a new home, head to grandillusioncinema.org/moving. That story first aired in February. The Grand Illusion is still searching for a spot to call home, but volunteers have not stopped bringing movies to the people. You can still watch films with the team from the Grand Illusion at the Northwest Film Forum in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. That's it for Soundside today. The show was produced by Shane Mailing, Hans Anderson, and Jason Burrows, with support from Sarah Leibovitz, Gabrielle Healy, and Maliha Syed. I'm Libby Dankman. Soundside will be off tomorrow for the Christmas holiday. We will be back with you with more archive shows, some of our favorite stories of the year, next week. Merry Christmas, everybody.